We all know wine and cheese go well together, but they may have more in common than you think. Kirby Froese spent years working in the wine business all over the world. He recently made the move back to his hometown of Moose Jaw, and now he's turning his attention to cheese. His business is called Coteau Hills Creamery. Kirby is one of our IMSK nominees, and he joins me now in the studio. Good morning, Kirby.
Good morning.
Tell me a little bit more about Coteau Hills Creamery.
We started the business, we opened for business just over a year ago, but it was about a year prior to that with planning and organizing who is supposed to inspect us and that sort of thing. So
all the logistics to get it off the ground. Yeah. So tell me a bit more about how you came to go from wine to cheese.
Well, I'm not sure where exactly the inspiration came from, but it's fermentation of milk rather than fermentation of grapes. The parallels in the business are time, temperature, hygiene. There's some other variables that are included with milk. The fat content, protein contents are always changing. You need curing rooms, a little bit different than you would for, say, a barrel room. But beyond that, the marketing of the business in itself is very similar to marketing a boutique winery.
Right, and people take it seriously whether they like one or the other or both, don't they?
They know they're very subjective.
Yeah. So when you were in the wine business, what turned your attention to cheese?
We sold the winery in 2011 to move back to be with our family. We're both, my wife Crystal and I are both from Moose Jaw. And I was working in the hospitality field and really wanted to go back to work for myself again. And I'm not sure exactly where the inspiration came from, but it was just that light bulb idea. And I noticed that there was a significant gap in the market in Saskatchewan for the artisan cheese movement. It's a huge, Ontario alone the artisan cheese business is $300 million a year. And right now there's only 2 dairy processors left in the province. It's Coteau Hills Creamery and Saputo. And I am literally just a drop in the bucket compared to what they process.
Literally, yes. I grew up on a dairy farm in Saskatchewan, and now my folks are out on a beef farm in British Columbia where there's a growing artisanal cheese business as well. But as you mentioned, Saskatchewan, not so much. And in fact, someone mentioned you the other day, a national chef I was talking to on the afternoon edition, as just, Saskatchewan getting into this emerging market. So you mentioned there's quite a bit of research that you had to do to get into it. And now that you're into it, what's the process? Just tell us a bit about what you do.
Well, I receive milk. I'm able to receive milk every other day, although at this point I'm only doing 1 make a week. Receive the milk into my tiny little vat. It's only about 750 liters, and I pasteurize the milk there.
Where'd you get it from?
The milk it's purchased through Sask Milk, but all of the milk that I process is from Karen Crest Farms. It's the McLeod family out of Caronport, who are actually partners in the business as well.
Oh, okay.
So it's fantastic to know exactly where the milk's coming from, and the fact that it's only 20 kilometers from the creamery. Nice. I know it's of good quality too. Yeah. So it's processed, it's pasteurized, and at that point I add cultures, bacterial cultures. So it's all natural. And the cultures that I use are specific to the type of cheese that I'm going to make. At this point, we're really focusing on a Balkan feta style of cheese, but I've got a few other recipes that I'm playing around with, a bloomy rind and a washed rind cheese. So once the cultures have ripened or changed the lactose in the milk to lactic acid, then I add a coagulant. It's called rennet, and I use a vegetable-based rennet, and that sets up the milk. And so it's almost like a gel in the tank at that point. And I have a set of knives that I use to cut that gel, and that's when the whey starts to separate from the casein, or it's the curds in the whey at that point. Right. And I drain off the whey, and that's actually shipped back to the dairy. Okay. Because it's the BOD, the biological oxygen demand, is too much for the city sewer. Okay. And it's also protein. It's full of protein, so it goes back to the dairy cattle. So then I scoop the curds. Actually, I scoop them by hand. There's a lot of fancy ways to do it, but I use a bucket and a shovel. Yeah. those are scooped into forms, into molds or forms called hoops. And with the Balkan feta style, I don't need to press it, although some of the others would be pressed. And then I let it drain it overnight, salt it, pack it.
So from getting the milk to selling the cheese, how long a process?
Well, I let it sit in the brine that it's packed in for a couple of weeks. It's still ripening and changing a little bit.
Yeah.
And when it's packed in brine, it's got a shelf life of, well, I say 6 months, but I know that it's closer to a year.
Yeah. And what's the reaction been to your business?
People are very surprised at first that, particularly in Moose Jaw, this is our second year of the farmers market, and we constantly have people saying, I didn't know we had a creamery in Moose. I didn't know we made cheese in Moose Jaw.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I didn't know you made cheese in Moose Jaw until this guest on the afternoon edition said you guys have one now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good response. And are people happy about just the local nature of it? Because you'll know that that's become a big thing, whether it's wine or cheese as well, as like you say, knowing it comes from the farm down the road is a really nice thing for people.
There's a very positive response to that. The local food movement is really growing in Saskatchewan very quickly now. I've seen it after living in British Columbia for 15 years. I've seen it now starting to grow in Saskatchewan. And a lot of restaurants are very interested in that, but beyond just restaurants, the interest in food, knowing where your food comes from, is really growing. And I mean, it takes me one day, if I do a food demonstration in a deli or something like that, I mean, it's one day and everybody that goes through knows that here it is, and it's from Caronport, and they taste it. And
yeah, are you going to let me taste it?
Yeah, I've got it right here.
So what's next for Coteau Hills Creamery? You can tell me while I taste your cheese.
Well, the next is just product development for a couple more brands.
That is good. This is really good.
You're supposed to do that with your mouth full?
Probably not.
A couple of other brands, and working on a few other products. We might be getting into something closer to fluid milk. But at the moment, it's the bloomy rind cheese, which is a brie recipe that we call Veronica May. And the other it's a French Alpine recipe, but because my molds are a different size, the cheese turns out a little differently. So Veronica May is the bloomy rind, and Veronica was my grandmother's middle name, and May is my mom's middle name. And the other we call Tower Hill, which is the height of land out behind the dairy in Caronport. And it's got a tower at the top of the hill. So that's what they call it.
Well, congratulations, and thanks for coming in and telling us about it.
Thank you very much.
That's Kirby Froese, Moose Jaw-based cheesemaker and the owner of Coteau Hills Creamery and one of CBC's IMSK nominees.